Hi, everyone. I'm Chris Lewicki. I'm an aerospace engineer. Spent the first 10 years of my career working at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory as a system engineer on Mars rovers and Mars landers. And second 10 years of my career so far was in helping to start the asteroid mining industry. And today I'm going to give a talk about space infrastructure and the manner in which it really supports the development of the space economy. So infrastructure is something we're totally surrounded by, and it's so prevalent in our daily lives that we just look through it. We see the horizons and we filter out the foreground, which is everything that makes our lives possible, from power lines to communications, plumbing and sewer, data, relay, and the services that go along with them. But for 50 years and billions of dollars of investment, the only infrastructure that we have in space are these 5 little laser ranging retro-reflectors. The first was installed by Buzz Aldrin in about 10 minutes on a moonwalk in Apollo 11. The last was installed 50 years ago yesterday on Apollo 15. And these allow us to precisely measure to within a centimeter the distance from the Earth to the moon. And they take no power. They still work. Anyone on Earth can use them, and they will probably continue to work for a very long time. But unfortunately, this, for all of our investment, is the only infrastructure that we have in space. So infrastructure is something we hear about all the time. Maybe we'll get a bill approved to fund more infrastructure here in the United States. But it's something that we can really think about in 3 different ways. Probably we're most familiar with the hard infrastructure, the roadways we drive on, light rail, and also the cars on the light rail system are often a part of that hard infrastructure, the things that make that infrastructure work. There's the softer things, which fall into the category of services. You could look at this as banking, emergency services, schools. They're also very important to keep the whole economy going. And then critical infrastructure, which is really the basics. This is shelter, food, and water, and all those things that allow everyone to have access to those things. So this food supply chain, water purification, waste treatment, those things. So in space, most everything is probably going to start out being critical infrastructure because the environment doesn't have the infrastructure of an atmosphere or a place to stand or a place to build that road. So looking at that in 2 ways, a big question that I have, and with these laser ranging retroreflectors as kind of a guidepost, what can we build in space that if we fail or cease to exist at some point, will it still be there? The International Space Station there on chart is something that if we didn't pay attention to it for a year or 2, it'd fall out of orbit. And we recently had a docking with a Russian module that threatened that for a few hours. So even our biggest investment so far isn't quite into the category of space infrastructure. Government is often in the case of installing and creating infrastructure. It often falls into something that's a natural monopoly. So it makes a lot of sense to just have one of high voltage power lines or a single highway going from point A to point B. But often government will subcontract those things to a company and get competitive bids for building them. So some examples for what we might do within space infrastructure is, very familiar things like GPS, but GPS for the moon, which makes coming to and going from the moon a lot easier. Relaying the data back and forth. We think of an airport and having a place for the planes to land. Having a place for spaceships to land on the moon is going to be important. And the list really goes on. You can even get into soft infrastructure, which is becoming a problem in space, of being able to manage all the traffic and all of both the active satellites as well as the debris that's in orbit. So here's a 100-year-old example that is relevant for the space age. And in particular, when we think about space resources and space mining and fuel, here's an example with still operating tourist railway where there were water stops along the way. You could bring the wood and the coal with you, but you needed to periodically replenish the steam. So these water stops were set up along the railway. So in this case, you could create a strategic fuel depot and be both a customer for it and a supplier for it, and kind of create a trading account around that. And we'll probably actually even have water itself, water stops in space. And the last point is something we're seeing with our cloud infrastructure. Amazon is maybe an earlier example of it, where you're providing a huge service to the world and you need a massive amount of your own infrastructure to create that. How can you actually create your infrastructure as something that you sell so that you are a customer of your infrastructure and your infrastructure can have customers? So that's, I think, the biggest opportunity in space, and really what I think is going to be necessary to scale it out. And I'm excited about the things that we're going to build in space that will be there for future generations. So thanks for listening today.